I got this comment on a video. It's a video that I knew would generate off-color comments when I made it, so it's not exactly a surprise. It's on the video that I made about leaving the church, which you may or may not have seen, and you may not feel like necessarily applies to you. Depending on where you're at in life, if church means anything to you. It's not really the point. It's what's in the comment that I think actually does apply to all of us, and it's something that really applied to me, both then and still does now. Echoes of the past, if you will. The lie. Wait, what? We can go take a look at the comment in question. Let me find the comment here really quick. It just took me a second. YouTube hides, as soon as you respond to a comment, YouTube basically hides it forever and you have to actually go digging for it, which is not a bad thing. I forgot how much there was in this comment. Now also, don't go looking for this. I'm not trying to encourage anyone to go and engage with this person. The reason I'm doing this is because there's a point that I'd like to pull out, but I'll read this to you just to give you an idea of what kinds of fun, I mean, you know what happens in the comments. Errors. Religious does not describe a Christian. It is a relationship with God through the Son. Typical failure. Self. All about me, me, me. Always fails humans. For being a PK, which is code for pastor's kid, you missed the whole Magilla? Therapy was your largest mistake. You left the truth for the lie. I will keep you in my prayers. Which I appreciate, thanks for your prayers. But while you're praying, the rest of us are going to talk about a powerful logical fallacy that I think keeps a lot of us in different cages, regardless of what kind of cage that might be. And that's, well, it's one of my favorite phrases, a semantic stop sign. Well, what is a semantic stop sign? There are a couple of other terms that are used for this, like a thought-stopping cliche, or a thought-terminating cliche, or a curiosity stopper. The idea is that anytime you have some curiosity about something, you're asking questions that creates discomfort in somebody else. They ask a question or have a pithy saying that sounds like folk wisdom or just something that sounds handed down and like has a little bit of gravitas to it that completely short circuits the conversation. The term was originally developed by somebody who's studying the psychology behind the Chinese Communist Party in like the 60s. But it actually applies to any situation when you are questioning beliefs basically, or systems, power structures, whatever it is, and whoever you're talking to gets uncomfortable and decides to kind of dismiss the argument out of hand without actually engaging with it. Okay. Now, I grew up surrounded by an insane amount of machismo. I mean, it's not a competition, that's another form of machismo right there, I suppose. But more than enough, my fair share. And that was kind of the introduction that I had to semantic stop signs. I did grow up in the church. You could say the church is not a singular thing, right? Like it's a different thing to so many different people and it's a different experience, it's a different place. So not here to discuss that. This is obviously, my channel is not a channel for like politics and religion. So that's not what we're here to talk about. But it is an integral part of my experience because I was raised a pastor's kid, surrounded by a whole bunch of other pastors that happened to be the kind that were very intellectual and very incapable of admitting fault or struggle or any challenges whatsoever. If you admitted that you were struggling, that you were having a hard time, that maybe you didn't really know where you were going, what you were doing in life, or anything, I would imagine even as small as like, yeah, this week's been pretty hard, it was seen as a sign of weakness. It took you down a notch on the respect ladder. That's the group of guys that I grew up sitting around with, over-intellectualizing things like the Bible, and, you know, not getting in touch with our feelings because, well, feelings, emotions, you can't trust those. All you can really trust is your reason. The irony is that it was a group of people that like really, really valued the intellect, and so thinking was very important, but questioning, well, there were certain types of questions that were acceptable and a lot that weren't. And a semantic stop sign was a great way to nip something in the bud, where you started to ask a question and people would, you know, say, well, the Lord works in mysterious ways, ironically, or those are the lies of the devil, which is funny enough because the lies of the devil thing, that's actually listed on the Wikipedia page as like the most obvious examples, the lie. But you can see this in non-religious situations too. The most generic example I can think of is like you're uncomfortable in a situation where maybe things don't seem safe, or like maybe we're not doing this right, and you raise that to someone in authority and they just look at you and go, it's all good. Don't worry about it. It immediately undermines any form of discussion and just kind of nips it in the bud, pretending that everything will be fine when you know everything is not fine, but now you have to kind of continue on pretending like it is, because otherwise like it's just gonna get really awkward, and clearly they don't want to talk about it. Another example of this that I get in my comments fairly regularly is, "You're overthinking this," or "You think too much." And the equivalent in a number of other circumstances, whether it's in a workplace environment or, a religious one, kind of anywhere, is, you ask a lot of questions. It's that unwillingness to engage in the discussion just by like kind of throwing it back at the person, like by having questions or by having doubts. Maybe they're the problem instead of maybe the system is the problem. And it's that kind of a circumstance where if your concern for your belief system is stronger than the concern you hold for the person in front of you, struggling with whatever they are, maybe your belief system's bad. What can be hard to realize, I think, if you're on the receiving end of this, is that it's not so much that they're trying to put you in a cage or actually even engage at all. It's just to protect themselves. And I know this very well because I definitely am guilty of doing this a lot in my early 20s, especially when I was trying to resolve the cognitive dissonance I felt with my faith in particular, and then later with a lot of other things. I tried to resolve it by dismissing people's arguments or, using the mystery of the universe or whatever to avoid having the conversation and facing the fact that I didn't actually have good answers for a lot of things, and the structures in which I found myself that I had bought into wholeheartedly were insufficient to the task. The reason I don't take offense at comments like this anymore is because I realize that it really has nothing to do with me. On the other hand, throwing stuff around like therapy was a mistake, well, I think it's important at some point that we probably should discuss things like this because, they come up. The reason it actually makes total sense to me that somebody would utter the whole like therapy was your biggest mistake line, which is a bizarre one at face value, is because therapy inherently is a thing you do on your own. It's the work you do in and for yourself, hopefully with some guidance from somebody who's trained, licensed, a professional, like a medical professional. But at the end of the day, it can only get done if you're doing it for yourself. It's introspection. It's self-improvement. It's being aware of who you are, flaws and all, and embracing that and then changing. Change is hard, it's scary, and it requires you to face whatever false beliefs you might have and ultimately ask big questions and possibly leave some things you hold very dear behind. So the reason I think it's important to engage with this more than anything isn't to like prove a point or win any discussions, because I don't think that's even on the table here. Ultimately, what's happening when you see these kinds of comments, when you engage them, and honestly, it's these kinds of comments that initially made me really scared to release the video in the first place. It took me years to get to a place where I felt even remotely safe to say that I was having doubts, that I was struggling. My identity was so tightly wrapped up in my faith, and I'd made so many declarative statements about truth and everything else for decades that I was deeply embarrassed to even admit that I wasn't sure about it anymore, let alone to come to the point that I was like, I'm figuring this all out, right? It took a lot of courage and humility on my part, if I can toot my own horn for a second, and it came at a great cost. It was very painful. And the voices of the people that I grew up with, the people that I grew up around, the culture that I was in. Basically, I just knew I was going to be excommunicated from the community that I grew up in. Not everybody, but a fair number of people. Not Matt Rogers, today's Patron producer, who I know from college and who's seen me at my most declarative. Thanks, Matt, for sticking with me, just to throw that in there. But it was a really long process. And anybody that's going onto a YouTube video and leaving a comment to dismiss anything that I'm saying must be in a place where they're feeling that cognitive dissonance. And my hope is that anybody that's feeling that discomfort, might be brave enough to stop and ask the difficult questions and embrace whatever comes. Because personally, I did grow up believing in the truth, and that the truth would set you free. And if whatever we believe in is true, then it can withstand scrutiny. And everything that we do believe deserves to be scrutinized, because, at least for me personally, I would like to believe something, anything that's true, rather than continue to live in whatever falsehood I might be carrying with me. Not that I'd be doing that anymore. I'm sure I am. But this is where therapy becomes important. And also, this ties in because this video is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is a twofold thought. One is what I said earlier, which is true. I grew up with a very high value placed on intellectualism, thinking, reason, all of that. And one of the things that I came to discover through therapy, my therapist actually pointed this out to me, one of the ways that I was able to survive my childhood, which sounds dramatic, we haven't really gotten into the details of my childhood yet, but basically one of the reasons that I was able to come out the other side and not be a total wreck, just partially a wreck, was through intellect, was through thinking and reasoning. It's a defense mechanism that I cultivated as a kid to help me get through a lot And now as an adult, there are definitely times where I overthink things. I know that, I'm aware of that, and I'm working on it. I'm getting better. However, all of life's most important questions require thought and reflection, and getting to know ourselves, understand ourselves, and improve ourselves, be the fullest, happiest, healthiest version of ourselves, requires a depth of knowledge, not only of the world around us and those great questions, but of the depths of who we are, where we come from, how we were formed and molded as children, and how our experiences entering into adulthood have led us to the point that we are right now. I saw this quote this week, and it's really stuck with me, from Haruki Murakami, where he said, "Such wounds to the heart will probably never heal, but we cannot simply sit and stare at our wounds forever." The last thing we want to do is get stuck staring at the things that hurt us, but the only way past them is through them. So engaging with them is really important. And as you know, if you've been following my channel for a long time, or not even maybe that long, I'm a huge fan of therapy. It's been very deeply impactful for me in my own life. And so when BetterHelp approached me to sponsor videos a long time ago now, they've been a very consistent and very good sponsor for my channel. It makes a lot of sense to me, because if I can help connect people to themselves through something like therapy, therapy's not for everybody, and there's so many different types of therapy, there's so many different ways of going about it, but it's always just felt like a no-brainer to do my part to help promote it. It's something that I talk about whether or not I'm being sponsored, but the fact that a sponsor like BetterHelp might come in and make that easier, I think it's a really cool thing. So hopefully they'll forgive me for putting this at the end of the video, because normally I should put this farther up, but I didn't want it to interrupt the flow of what I had to share. At the same time, I would hope that if therapy is something that does interest you, if it's something you've been thinking about, or if you have questions, doubts about who you are, where you're at in life, what you believe, where you're going, maybe give therapy a try. Like, it is something that I wanted to do and thought about doing for years, and didn't do. And when I finally got to it, when the pain was finally enough that I was like, I need to get out of my own way, I'm gonna talk to somebody. It was very hard. I'm not gonna lie to you, very uncomfortable, but also very worth it. So if you're thinking about trying it and you're not sure how to access it, BetterHelp is a platform that'll connect you to a wide variety of providers across a spectrum of disciplines. And the cool thing is that they make it really easy to try different providers, no questions asked. Like, it's a commitment that only lasts as long as you want or need it to. And then you can see if you find somebody with whom you click, which is often the hardest part about finding somebody in therapy. So if you go to betterhelp.com/Jay Swanson, they'll give you 10% off your first month. It helps my channel, but I also hope that it will be something that's helpful for you. And whether or not you end up doing it through BetterHelp, I definitely hope that it's something you will consider and think about, and whenever the time is right, that you'll jump on. Because one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is the gift of self-knowledge. And it takes a lot of hard work, and it's really scary and uncomfortable sometimes, but it's gonna lead us somewhere much better if we engage with it. I truly believe that. I know that, I feel that. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you're doing all right wherever it is you are, and I'll see you bright and early again tomorrow morning for another one of these videos. Who knows what's coming tomorrow? You never know with me.